Okay, we are live. Let me just readjust. Let's give it a second so I know people are out there. I know I'm live. Okay. Okay, looks like I am live on YouTube now. So when people start entering the room, do let me know, I can start talking. Beautiful day today. I just got a thank you from Facebook. You're welcome, Facebook. I'm going to cut back to me. Okay. I'm just going to change views slightly.
Also, like, the other day after...
Hey Moo, good to see you again. Good to have you on board. Hello Monica from Argentina. How you doing today? Hi from Kent. Hi Sarah. How you doing? Hello from the Netherlands. Hello Eddie from the Netherlands. Yes, rocks. Okay, it's a little unfortunate. Okay, there is Arthur's seat right behind me. There, that is Arthur's seat. That's where we're going to be heading to today. Hello, Palmyra from Mexico, and hello, Diana from Cardiff. Hope you're doing well. It is a beautiful evening. I was a little worried that the weather might be really bad. Hey Ross, I think I remember you from Edinburgh. I believe I remember you from the last broadcast. So I'm going to be walking around Arthur's Seat today. Just so you know, I'm going to be walking uphill, and I'm going to be stressing this when I start the tour. I'm going to be walking uphill. So if I start panting, you know why. Diana from California, not Wales. Okay. Another Diana. Okay, another Diana. Two Dianas. That's okay. Diana's a very popular name. And popular for a good reason. It's a beautiful name. While we're waiting for more people to come in, I'm just going to flip the screen around. Oh, okay. Hold on 1 second. There we are. Sorry you have to see my finger come towards the camera. There's no other way to do it. But it's a little hard to see, but off in the distance is Edinburgh Castle. Hello Lorraine from New York. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And there is the beautiful... In fact, I'm going to be a little bit brave. I'm going to get into the sunlight. I'm in the shadows at the moment. Okay, so there's a few Dianas. Diana at... Ooh... Greety? I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, that was her last name. Okay, for some reason, I was just thinking, well, maybe that's just some place I don't know yet. Okay. So I'm going to brave it a little bit. I'm going to get into the... Afraid the sunlight might stop, Oh, sorry, Michelle. Michelle. So it's very small print. It's a little tricky to see. You can see the beautiful gross growing, the beautiful yellow flowers. Hi Nikki from sunny Murrayfield, Edinburgh. So you've got the exact same sun as I have. That is the ruins of St. Anthony's Chapel right here. I'll get more into that when we kick things off. Another couple of minutes. 4 minutes to be exact. Yeah, it is. It's beautiful up here. This was my COVID fitness. This is when I'd out towards Craig Miller, a little bit away from the city. But when I used to live near the city, and this was during the start of COVID, I used to run up to Arthur's Seat. I used to run up Arthur's Seat every single day. And I hope that fitness is still with me. Hello, Mackies. I think it's Mackies from Cologne. So yes, I'm going to be exploring the beautiful Arthur's Seat. I'm going to be telling you about, well, the history of the place. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Arthurian legend, because I love me a good King Arthur story. And hopefully I won't be out of breath when I get to the top of the hill. And I'll be able to tell you more stories. But yes, that's where we're going to be walking today. I'm just going to flip things around for a moment, just so you can see. Here I am. Ooh, might get a little bit out of the sun, just so I'm not blinding you with my very pale skin in the sunlight. Let me just get a little bit over this way. Here we are. Hello, Chi from Singapore, and hello. Oh, okay. Now, is it Tijil? I'm probably saying that wrong. Can you write your name phonetically? I'm in the country. I'm not actually in the countryside. I'm going to say your last name, Neil. I'm not actually in the countryside. I'm very close to the city. But this is Arthur's Seat, Holyrood Palace. And it's good to see you again too. I've been doing quite well. Been keeping myself as healthy as I can. Hello, Chi from Singapore. Hello, Ivana from Argentina. I hope there's also a ghost story included. Says, Thorsten? I'll think, I don't normally tell ghost stories on Arthur's Seat, but I believe I can tell you. And, I think I know where I can talk about a ghost. I'll try to keep that in mind. Everyone loves a good old ghost story of me ghosting people. Yes, that's been a bit of my curse at the moment. Whenever I do these live streams, hopefully it won't stay that way, but whenever I do these live streams, something happens and I drop off for a moment. I ghost you all. You may as well call me David the Ghost. Actually, don't call me that. Someone else on the Royal Mile is already called David the Ghost. I'm just David from Australia. I'll leave it at that. Hello, Danielle from... Hello, Danielle. Hello, Maria from Argentina. Hello from Alabama. I'm not sure what your name is. It looks like it looks like a long username. Yeah, is the connection okay? Can everyone hear me okay? Mic, which I've got hidden, which I've just revealed to everyone, so it's not really hidden anymore. But I got a nice little mic my wife gave me, which will hopefully get rid of some of the sound issues. It's going to be very windy up here as well. So it looks like reception is pretty good. There's always going to be little bleeps when you're using like 3 and 4G. Hello, Cosmos from Sydney Harbour Walking. Hope you're doing well. So I might just find a slightly background in. There we are, Margaret's Chapel. Margaret's Chapel is not here. This is Anthony's Chapel. Yeah, it is really nice. I love walking through Arthur's Seat. I've been up this hill so many times, I can never get bored of this. It is a beautiful place. Okay, so here we are. So hello everyone. Welcome to the Arthur's Seat tour, brought to you by SANDEMANs. I am your guide, David. We're going to be walking around the beautiful Arthur's Seat. I'm going to tell you about the Wild Mackies that came up here. I'm going to be telling you some great stories, some great legends. I'm also going to talk a little bit about King Arthur, because there is a good King Arthur connection to this seat. In fact, there's quite a lot, which I can't wait to get into. Now, I've been a tour guide here in Edinburgh for 8 years. I've been taking people around the city, I've been telling people history. I was not just a history tour guide, I was also a castle tour guide, a horror tour guide, and also a Harry Potter tour guide. And I loved it all. But I'm originally from Australia. In 2013, after I finished my degrees in performing arts acting and criminology and forensic science, for I had a choice, actor or detective, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do something different. So I did a European trip. I ran out of money. I came to Edinburgh, I got a job as a tour guide, and I loved it. But in the back of my mind, I always thought I was going to return to Australia. That's until I met a woman. I fell in love, I got married, I got stuck here. But I still love Edinburgh, and I still love my wife. They're the main things. And I still love guiding. Though guiding has changed a bit, we are now going to be doing live tours again, but for quite a while we couldn't do live in-person tours. So that's why we started up this initiative of doing virtual tours. Now, just so you know, I am a freelance guide. I get nothing from the company. I am paid purely from how well I do my tours. So I do ask, if you do like this tour today, please pay what you feel this tour is worth to you. That's great for you guys because you all get to judge me. You see, at the end of the day, you can go, you know what, David, that was a great live stream, I learnt a lot, I'm going to give you something in return. Or you can say, you know what, David, I didn't like you at all. I thought you were... It is up to you at the end. But hopefully I will be able to entertain you and tell you some great history. And if you really do like it, you'll find my PayPal is in the chat. You'll also find my PayPal like in the comments section below as well. And that's the best way to donate to me. But now let's get things kicked off, and before we start talking about the seat itself, I've got to quickly talk about what's behind me. And I saw a question. One of the questions was, how far away is it from the city, Arthur's Seat? Well, from the centre of the Royal Mile to get to the start of Holyrood Park, it's about, what, 10 minutes? 15 minutes at most to get here. But first of all, I want to talk about Margaret's Chapel. So I'm going to flip around the camera just to get a slightly better view. I'm going to try the best I can to be gentle. Margaret's Chapel. I don't know why I keep saying Margaret's Chapel. This is actually St. Anthony's Chapel. It is the ruins of a 13th century chapel. 13th. Okay, you know, when it comes to hundreds, it actually was built in the 1300s. We're not sure when. And so I was thinking 1300, so I said 13th century, which is actually the 1200s. But it was built in the 14th century. The first written account comes from the Pope, who in 1426, he was writing back a letter saying, yes, I'll give you money to build this up. Now, this used to be a 40-foot tower right in the centre. I am not joking. Now, St. Anthony, he was a Lisbon saint. He was a Lisbon priest who used to look after the ill. And by the way, this had a beautiful view of the Firth of Forth. The North Sea just out there might be a little hard to see from the phone. But when the sailors would come into port, they would see this church here. As soon as they come back, they also want to thank God for their safe voyage. There's also a little thing that the Scottish sailors would do. If they were caught in a really bad storm and they were single, they'd actually say, God, if I survive this, I'll give up my single ways and I'll marry the first woman I see coming into port. And so there were quite a lot of proposals at the ports. And obviously if you're going to propose to a woman, you've got to take them somewhere to get married. So why not take them here to the beautiful St. Anthony's Chapel. Now it's a little in the dark at the moment, so I'm going to move it out a bit. We've got the sunset coming in, which is a bit of an issue, which means the sun's at a very low angle. Which means when I look this way, you get some beautiful views, but when we look the other way, it's a little funny. Anthony's Chapel was a Catholic chapel. Now, after the Protestant Reformations of the 15th, they stopped pumping money into the Catholic establishments. The Protestants saw the Catholic establishments as way too grandeur, they should be more humble, and so they stopped repairing the place, it stopped being used, and as time went on, it did fall in decay. Now, I just want to quickly show you something on screen, an artist's rendition. I'll give you an idea of what it would have looked like compared to what it is now. Sorry. But now, onto the seat itself. Now the highest point is Arthur's Seat, and the entire area is known as Holyrood Park. There's a lot of legends behind this place. When the early Scots came here, one of the first writings we have said it was a dragon that ate way too much and then, well, passed out. It was devouring the land, but devoured too much, passed out, and Arthur's Seat itself is its corpse. Now, on certain angles, it does look like a coiled up dragon. And by the way, these beautiful yellow flowers, that's called gross. They actually smell like coconuts. It's a really nice smell. That's one legend behind the seat itself, that it's a coiled up dragon. Another one is that it's a giant called Samson. Now, it was a fire giant who decided to take on the winter goddess. It was the winter goddess who created Scotland. Now, he fought the winter goddess. The winter goddess killed him by flying through his stomach, and what's left is his corpse. There's also another lion. On a certain angle, it does kind of look like a crouching lion if you use your imagination. Fight for Edinburgh. Now, a funny little story. You see, I used to do Arthur's Seat tours. I did them privately. And when I was telling the story about the dragon, on a certain angle, it does look like a coiled up dragon with a dragon's head. And I was telling the story to a group of Westerners. They were from America, but I also had a Chinese man with me. And when I said, "Do you see the dragon?" they said yes, and they all pointed to the dragon's head, or what I believe looks like the dragon's head. And the Chinese man, he pointed to a different place and said, "Yes, that's the dragon." And it took me a while to figure out that Chinese dragons are different. So he saw a different dragon on Arthur's Seat, an eastern dragon. Now, in terms of geology, this was a massive volcano with two other satellite volcanoes, and they are that's where Edinburgh Castle is, and also Carlton Hill on it, and a little go off Carlton Hill. Now, this was the main volcano with the two other ones. It last erupted 340 million years ago. Now, this is when Edinburgh was down at the equator. There was actually a shallow sea coming in. As time went on, the land shifted, and now we are 42 degrees north, the same latitude as Moscow. Obviously, it's a lot cooler, so this cooled down. So this is an extinct volcano. Now, this area we're walking through now, just off, sorry about the views, the grass is really tall at the moment. This is what's called the Winey Hill, also known as the Fairy Knoll. Believed to be one of the places that the fairies would dwell. I just want to point out, oh, okay, when I get higher I'll point out a different view. I just wait for the sun to go down a little bit. But I want to tell you a more recent story. This happened in 1980. A young labourer came to the Winey Hill at his lunch break. He used to love walking around it. He'd have his lunch up here. Now one day he's sitting up here and he actually missed his lunch that day. So when work was over, he came up here, it was sunset, it was coming up to sunset, and he started eating his lunch when he started hearing this, what he called Irish folk music, and he thought, oh, that's really sweet. And then this mist rolled in, and the sun started creating these beautiful little rainbows. It was like, whoa, I am so lucky to be here. Now, because it was sunset time, his shadow was very long. And he's looking at his shadow cast out in front of him. And then he said this little man started rolling up the edge of his shadow. Now he looks at his sandwich like, wait, what's going on here? He then looks down and there's this little woman clipping the shadow away from his feet. Now he just yelled out, "Oi, stop!" They looked up at him and disappeared. And so did the mist, and so did the music. Now he immediately reported this to the police. The police apparently drug tested him, and his system came up clean. And this labourer wasn't known to tell tall tales or be on anything. And remember, this is 1980. So this is a very recent fairy story. Now, is everyone still with me? I can't see too much in the chat, so keep talking, just so I know you're there. Are people with me? I'll give it a second. But also, while we're here, I want to point out, now it's a little hard to see, but there's almost like a pathway going up the gross, up through. Oh yeah, people are here. I can see you now. The chat's just updated itself. Awesome. You can see that little pathway going all the way up through the Gross. Now in 1834, two boys were hunting rabbits up here on the Winey Hill. And yes, the flowers are very hypnotic, but they were hunting flowers up here when their dog stuck its nose into a cave, apparently right where you can see that gap as it goes up further in that natural the natural pathway. There's a little cave at the top of that. The dog put its nose in the cave and started barking, and the boys thought, oh, that must be a rabbit. They stick their head inside, and instead they found 17 miniature coffins. Now I'm going to bring them up on screen so you know what they look like. Oh wait, do I have them? Oh, doesn't look like I have them at the moment. But they found, you can look these up, the 17th coffins on Arthur's Seat. They're readily available, just Google search them. Now these 17 coffins, they were tiny things, they were like toy coffins. There was 2 rows of 8 with one on the top. And being boys, they just started playing with them. Now their parents called the police and all 17 were taken. 8 of them were then donated to the National Museum of Scotland, right here in Edinburgh. And so you can see them on display, but what were those tiny coffins? Well, there's a few theories. The first theory is witches, because why not? You can blame anything on witches. Second theory was sailors. Well, sometimes when sailors would go out to sea, if they're fearing they won't come back, they would give an effigy of themselves to a friend. And when they give the effigy to the friend, they'd say, if I die out at sea, at least part of me can be buried here on Scottish soil. And so maybe there were 17 sailors who never came back. Oh, someone's put it in the chats. Thank you so much for that. Now that's an interesting theory, but that was a very old custom from the 17th century. And the actual coffins themselves, they look like they came very recently, like recently from the time that they were discovered, probably even the 1820s. That brings up a third theory. Those 17 coffins represent the victims of Burke and Hare, two serial killers. Burke being the more religious of the two, and also considering himself a toy maker, they think he might have made the coffins and put them in there as a way to give the people that they were killing some sort of burial. And if you want to hear more about Burke and Hare, come on my horror tour. They are really great. Really great. Well, I really love doing a horror tour, I should say. But now we're going to continue on. I also want to tell you that this entire section here, going back to the 18th century, there would have been a little shanty town running through the area. Now this was what's called a debtor's sanctuary. Now a debtor's sanctuary, that's where if you've got overflowing debt and you can't pay it back, in those times that was a criminal offence. However, Holyrood Park was considered a debtor's sanctuary. So a debtor cannot come and claim the debt off you. Now, this was in the 16th century, well, before the 16th century, it was just sanctuary in general. No criminal could be arrested by a bailey here in Holyrood Park. But they got rid of that past the 16th century, but they never took away the debtor's sanctuary. Now, a lot of people would fall into debt, and rather than go to prison, they could come here to Arthur's Seat. They could camp out, and on Sundays, when the bailies weren't allowed to arrest people, they can go and visit their families and go speak to their debtors to try to settle the debt. Now, this was not just the entirety of Holyrood Park, including Holyrood Palace, that King Charles the 10th of France, he actually stayed at Holyrood Palace for 3 years, 1796 and 1799. And that was just so he can escape his debts. I find this very peaceful and relaxing just outside the city, yes. This is a very peaceful, also a lot of uphill. So that's why you can hear me. But yeah, going back to the debtor's prison sanctuary. Now, it was in the 19th century they decriminalised it. You can no longer, it became a civil offence. So it was in the 19th century they had no need for the debtor's sanctuary. But I'd love to imagine this small shanty town coming through this valley of people just, you know, they're a bit down on their luck, they can't pay back their debts, so they'd set up a shanty town, they'd all live in it together in a community, only to be able to see their loved ones on a Sunday. A mill here, and they would do sewing and they'd do whatever they can to try to raise money to get out of that debt. But eventually it became a civil crime, no longer a criminal crime, and they didn't have to run away from the bailies. Now, looking back, just to have a bit of a look at the more hypnotising gross. Oh, that's very, very shiny. Very shiny gross. Now, just wanted to, something I forgot to mention about St. Anthony's Chapel. Just so you can see that I'm still alive, even though I'm breathing heavily, as in like I'm completely fine. St. Anthony's Chapel, it was a place of pilgrimage. A lot of, especially in the 15th century, it was one of the places you had to hit on your pilgrimages. Now, I want to talk a moment about pilgrimages because that was where you get the idea of the Grail quest. Now, the Grail, and I always love using the Monty Python version. Now, the actual quest of the Grail in the Arthurian legend was never a quest about getting the Grail itself. It was a quest of knowledge. And that's the whole point of a pilgrimage. You go from place to place, you learn different things. It's almost like the grail itself represents a cauldron, the idea of mixing ideas. And when you mix up old ideas, you can create new ideas. Making soup a spiritual thing. You're taking all these different ingredients, mashing them together. The ingredients themselves might be a little plain, but when you put them together, it creates something amazing. And that's the idea of a pilgrimage. And that's the idea of a grail quest. To go out there, things, discover new things. When you come back, create new ideas. I'm going to jump back, change the view. Also, standing for a second does give me a moment to get my breath back. Beautiful valley through here. Now, I also want to point out what's called the now the Hag's Knoll. A bit further up, we're going to walk past it. When the play Macbeth came out, which was very crudely put together and falling to pieces. But anyway, the Hag's Knoll. The Hag's Knoll, it gets its name from the play Macbeth. Now, when they were advertising Shakespearean plays, even though Macbeth was set in the Highlands, they'd quite often use, our local stuff to advertise it, and local ideas. And what happened was, the performers would do what's called spruiking, where they would run out and they would do a scene of the play to advertise it. And they used to do it on a few different hills, but three actors who were playing the witches would come up on the hill and do the very famous double, double, toil and trouble. And because I loved naming the hills after those three witches, the Hag's Knoll. So, a little bit of Shakespeare on the hill as well. Someone would be with me if they didn't have to study. Yeah, it'd be great. You know what? Things are changing now. We can actually have people walking around with us. That would be great. Maybe one of these tours coming up, not only will you get to see me, you'll see a group of people behind me. Or a group of people with me, sort of enjoying everything I'm enjoying. But now, I'm just going to dodge a few people. The sun is a little funny, so I'm going to maneuver the best I can. One thing I should also point out is walking up this hill, I've only got one hand. Now in certain sections, I'm going to try the best I can to just do it with my feet and one hand if needed, but in certain sections I might have to briefly put the camera in my backpack. Just for a moment to get up. Oh, the sun's... It's beautiful out here. Now I want to quickly tell you a story. Something I mentioned on the last tour, but this is something I can show you on this tour. I want to quickly tell you about a man called Lailacan. Now Lailacan, he was a 6th century bard, druid, fighter, and he was the advisor to the last pagan king of Scotland, a man called Gwendoline. Now he told Gwendoline, you have to take down the Christian king of Strathclyde, otherwise our religion will never flourish. So Gwendoline and his men went to Strathclyde. They fought the Christian king Redin, and unfortunately all was slaughtered except for Lailacan, the advisor. Now, he went mad from grief because his king and all his men died because of his advice. So he ran into the Caledonian forests. Now he re-emerged 10 years later, apparently with the power of prophecy. Now he would interrupt religious ceremonies, shouting out his prophecy. He was trying to bring back the old pagan religion. Now he had a sister called Lengruith. Lengruith married the king that actually slaughtered Gwendoline and his men. Now it makes kind of sense that maybe Lailekin and Lengruith were the prince and princess of that realm. And that's why the new Redin, after slaughtering the realm's king, took the realm's daughter as his bride. Now Lengruith, some say the Forgotten Queen, went to a priest called Mongo, also known as Kentegral, well, Kentegral, also known as Mongo, and said, "Can you please bring my brother back to society?" Now, Kentegral didn't know who she was talking about when she was describing him, until Kentegral said, "Are you talking about the madman?" And the madman was known as Merlin. Because that is madman. Oh, sorry, one moment. Yep, there's the ghost you're looking for. Fiddling around with my gimbal. Now, Merlin means madman in Gaelic. The madman. And so he went and talked to the madman Merlin. And one of the places Lailekin, or Merlin, used to frequent was the Dumpsy Crag. See where the loch is. Now you see where that lake is? Just above that is the Dumpsy Crag. Massive Logan stone, also known as a rocking stone. Maybe you can just sort of make out the clearing just over there. Now that rocking stone, it was very heavy, but it was so well balanced on a small stone that you could just push it and it would rock backwards and forwards. It was a place of pagan courts. And that's where Merlin used to frequent a lot to do his rituals. And Lailekin, they become friends. Now Lailekin is still trying to bring back his religion, shouting out his prophecies, people calling him the madman Merlin. Until one day, Lailekin went up to Kentegral and said, "You now must give me communion, for today I'll die a triple death." Now Kentegral gave him the communion. So you see right there, Kentegral and Merlin. Well, it is a bit windy up here. So he had, let me just cut this. So he had his communion, he became a Christian, and later that day, he was captured by a group of shepherds who were working for a Christian king, and he was stabbed, stoned, and drowned. So he did die a triple death. Now Merlin, Mongo went on to become Saint Mongo, or Kentegral, Saint Kentegral. There were too many M's. Lailekin the madman, Merlin, he wanted to become Merlin, the basis of it. Unfortunately though, Merlin in French means the shitter. So Merlin means the shitter. So they started calling him Merlin instead. Sorry about the wind, guys. If you missed anything, just let me know in the chat. I should be a little bit out of the wind. So I'll always love to point out that the original Merlin used to frequent this area. The madman Merlin, better known as Lailekin. Now the funny thing about the Arthurian legend and Arthur's Seat itself is the first mention of King Arthur came from Edinburgh Castle. Now that was a poem called the Gododin. The Gododin spoke about a king called Minderdog the Open-Handed, who had a massive feast up in Dunedin, the original name for Edinburgh. He then took his men down south to fight the Angles, and they were slaughtered on the battlefield. And in that battle, during the battle, as the poet is making his references, he says there was one man called Gwenlog. And Gwenlog, though he left many ravens to eat, was no Arthur. Now that is the first historical reference of King Arthur. And that was over at Edinburgh Castle. Now one of the reasons why they call Arthur's Seat, behind it, I'm just going to wait until I get a slightly better view. 1 second. There's 3 main legends as to why it's called Arthur's Seat, which is just the top up there, which we will be heading to. But it's said that Arthur came to the top and watched his armies defeat the Anglo-Saxons. That's the first one. The second If you read the tale of Geoffrey of Monmouth, Arthur, and only the Now let me know if it gets a little bit windy. Thank you, Lorraine, for commenting on my storytelling. I know it's windy up here. I'm trying the best I can to cup the mic so it doesn't get too bad, but first of all, we're walking through an area which has been cultivated for over 3,000 years. Early man, well, more than that actually, 3,000 BC, so 5,000 years. We've found evidence that this is a place where they used to basically have like very primitive farming going on. We're walking through what's called the Lover's Valley. Just down from Arthur's Seat, you can see there's hills all around it. Now, it has, oh yeah, I'm sorry, the OC is back, yes, my gimbal is going nuts, I'm so sorry, and it's gone. There we go. Now, the reason why it's called the Lover's Valley, I'd love to think on a certain angle it looks like a love heart, which it does if you use your imagination when you're at the top looking down on it. But the main reason why it's called the Lover's Valley is this is where the men, so this is where the, let's just say women of the night, during a summer day, would bring their men to have a bit of fun. Because the ground is really, really soft here. It's really nice. Now, normally with that line of work, you'd pay the woman up front. But here in Arthur's Seat, they did something a little bit different. They said, oh, let's just see how far you go. Let's just see what happens. So the men wouldn't pay straight up. They'd start having their fun. And what they don't realise is that there will be women on all the hills. Ooh, a little bit bumpy there. The women on all the hills watching them. And those women who were watching them, they were coming up with the bill. Now, it's kind of like leaving your credit card at a bar and you start having fun, you start drinking, and at the end of the night, you're like, wow, I drank that much. Right up the bill. And when you start hitting down, a woman would confront you and say, okay, you had your fun, here's your tab. And you'd have to pay. So a very clever thing that they used to do here. Well, anyway, on to another story. Now, I want to show you the Nether Hill. In fact, we can see just the side of the Nether Hill here. It doesn't look that interesting just by looking at it, but we know in the 5th century there would have been a fortification up here. Now, we know this from archaeological digs. So there was a fortification with ramparts, basically a wall where you could walk across the top of it as well. Now, it's going to get quite bright, as you can see. But this was in the 5th century during our was, I wouldn't say a small military fort up here. A place where you can defend yourself. Now, I've walked around the Nether Hill. I can't find any physical evidence by looking at it, but I have seen sort of... There was a... Now, the funny thing is, from the top, you can see where Arthur... The way to really give credence to those legends was to also give them a setting. And they would point up the hill and go, hey, see that settlement? By the time of the Godon in the 7th century, it would have been a ruin. And they'd say, see this ruin on top of the hill? Well, that's where Arthur used to live. So it's a possible candidate for Camelot. Or at least what we call Camelot. The actual name Camelot came from a rhyme with Merlin, came with a rhyme with Lancelot. The tale of Lancelot going to Camelot is actually where you get the name Camelot. Before then it was called Camlion, was the very first reference to where he ruled from. Camlin. Now, you can just see the the Dunningston Lock just over there. Oh, you just saw your soccer team stadium, just flaring out. over that way. You can give me some give me some directions, Nikki, maybe in a bit. But anyway, the Dunningston Lock. Now, in the 18th century, they decided to excavate the lock. They were pulling things out, and they came across a lot of Bronze Age swords. Now, there was this old ritual. When a warrior dies on the battlefield, you take his weapon and you throw it into the lake. You're giving it back to the goddess, and the goddess will grant you another great warrior. That was an old pagan ritual. In fact, the lady who, the goddess of this area was Morgan Le Fay. Over your shoulder when you had the camera in, oh, so it was behind me. Okay, I'm sorry about that, Nikki. Yeah, anyway. Hopefully I'll get to see your statement in a bit. Now, the goddess of this area was Conventina, better known as Vivian. Later became the Lady of the Lake in the Arthurian legend. That was the goddess they worshipped in this area, and funny enough, over at Edinburgh Castle, they used to worship Morgana, or Mordern, which became Morgan Le Fay in the Arthurian legend. Now later, I'm going to cut back to me because we're going to walk around this corner. Later, when they said you're not sacrificing your sword to a pagan goddess, you're sacrificing it to a saint. When a warrior died on the battlefield, you throw their weapon into the water, and that will grant you pennies into a well. It's the idea of giving something to get something back, giving something to the water goddess and getting something back from her. Is there anywhere in the region that is safe to swim, even during normal times? I see people swimming. Well, in this region, time it is safe. If you find a day that's actually warm, then yes, go swim there. I'm yet to find a day warm enough, because remember, I came from Australia, so I'm yet to find days warm enough where I'd actually go and swim. But now, I'm going to start heading towards the top, the fort itself. Now, we believe this would have been one of the places of the coronation. Now, the people who actually lived in this area, they were said by the Romans that they were Picts, but they weren't Picts. Oh, the ghost is back again. I'm so sorry. Everything going nuts again. Okay. Sorry, Alexa. Now, the going back, the people who lived in this area were actually the Brythonic people. They were more related to the nowadays Welsh. I'm going to see if I can keep the sun out of the camera, but unfortunately the sun is right over there. But anyway, now the Brythonic ritual was, and it's also the same as an old Scottish ritual, was you take people to you take the new leader to the highest point, and they do the inauguration ceremony, where they would actually give them a sword. That was a ceremonial sword that they would use to protect their people. Now that is very similar to the old Gaelic ritual, where they do the same thing in the first Scottish, I'd say the first Scottish territory, known as Dalriata. If you go over to the west of Scotland and to the Dalriata Hill Fort, I just want to show you something. They have this. Now that was the inauguration stone. You can see there's a little foothold in it. Now the Scottish kings, they had a ritual where the new leader would come up and put his foot into the stone. He'd then be given the ceremonial sword. He'd raise the sword in the air and then take his foot out of the stone. And that's when he became the king. Now, a lot of people say that's where they got the idea of the sword and the stone. Having your foot in the stone when given the sword, and then taking your foot out. So a sword coming from it, so you're given the sword while you're in the stone. That was the old coronation ritual of the Scots. And the Brythonic people who lived in the area had a very similar I can show off a little bit more. That's called the Crow Hill just over here. To be honest, I'm not sure why, but it's called the Crow Hill. Now to continue from the rock, okay, I think my internet connection's a bit better now. Let me know in the chat if it's getting a bit patchy at times. Now, to continue on, David with glasses and ghosts. Yes, I'm sorry. A lot of ghosts always haunting me. Anyway, continue on. This wasn't really used as a fortification. If there was a fortification, if they're going to fight from anywhere, they would normally fight from the Nether Hill, very slowly turning around. That was a better place to have a fortification. The only one time people actually used the hill and what's known as the rebellion. I think the closer I get to the seat, the worse the connection gets. So I might climb the seat in silence. Maybe half the seat itself is blocking the connection. So the closer I get to the seat, the more time it says the internet's going a bit funny. But I'll quickly tell you the story of the Wild Mackies. Now this is after the Jacobite rebellions. In 1746, they outlawed the kilt, the Gaelic language here. They were trying to basically get rid of the Highlander way of life, and they sold off a lot of the Highlanders' land. One of the few things the Highlanders could do to make money was to join the British Army. Now in 1776, there is the American War of Independence. Now the Brits, they want to go take on the Americans to bring back their colony. Now word made it up to the Highlands, hey, the British Army, they're fearing naval attacks by both the French and the Americans. So, if you come down here, you did quite well. So the Earl of Seaford rounded up 1,300 men, known as Wild Mackies. Now, you might have heard of the clans like MacDonald, Macbeth, Macduff. The Wild Mackies were the lower clans, so they were Macs, but they weren't as well known. They weren't as well known as the big clans. So 1,300 of these wild Highlanders, the Wild Mackies, they marched down to Edinburgh. They're thinking they might have to defend off a naval attack. When they noticed there were big ships in the port of Leith. You see, I might back to me for a second because you're going to see it's not going to be the best view as I stumble up here, so maybe my face might be a little bit better. But anyway, they see the ships in the port of Leith. They also know that at the time, the Brits are fighting over in India. They've been lied to. They're going to send these men to India to fight. Now immediately, there's rumours are spreading. They ask their generals, do your orders. Stick with your orders. So the next day, they were told to march from the barracks down to the ships. 400 of them decided they weren't. And as they were walking down, they had a bagpiper in the front who was leading them. The bagpiper suddenly turned and took a different street and marched through the city of Edinburgh. They were what was going on. They actually cheered him on. They were lied to. Now, they a fort right at the very top, and over at the Nether Hill is where they set up their sleeping quarters. They're going to fight. They're not going to be sent to India because they were lied to. Now the 400 men who came up here, who set up their camp, they then hear news that 1,000 of British soldiers are going to descend on them to take them down. But they're willing to fight anyway. Before the fight starts though, the Earl of Dunmore comes up here and speaks to them and says, look, yes, you have been lied to. If I knew about this, I would have stopped it, but it's too late. He hears the Mackies' complaints and he cuts them a deal. We're going to pay you first. So when we pay you, all your money can go back to your family. And so, deal rather than fight, the monies went back to their family and they went to India. Now the 400 of these Wild Mackies who rebelled, They were the 78th Battalion, and unfortunately, well, none of them really came. I think maybe one or two of them came back. It was almost like a 99% kill rate. But that's what happens when you're in the army, unfortunately. When those times, that's just what happens. The Highlander armies quite often were just used as cannon fodder. They were the first ones put on the battlefield. Now, is everyone still with me? Just double checking I haven't been hit by a ghost again. People still with me? Hey, all with you. Awesome. You're all with me. Okay. Now, unfortunately, the sun is in a very bad position, but I should still be able to show off a little bit of the scenes from the top. We are coming up to sunset, and I want to be a little bit quieter because people are having a peaceful time up here, so I don't want to be too loud. Okay, let me see if I can get a slightly better view. Okay. It is beautiful views up here. Now, I just want to point out that valley you see. I'm going to talk very quietly, but that valley is known as the Hunter's Bog. Now that valley in between there, that's very famous for the whiskey smuggling. I don't really think I can block out the sun too much. There we go. But it was well known for the whiskey smuggling. Now, the whiskey smugglers, they really picked off in 1707 when the English put a tax on malt whiskey. Suddenly whiskey was so much more expensive. Now this was all a forested area. The whiskey smugglers, they were never seen as like villains, even though they were breaking the law. They were seen as folk heroes. They would set up their shop in the Hunter's Bog within the trees. The locals would come down here and buy from their favourite smuggler. Now the smugglers also have boys all around the hills here. And if the boys saw what's called an exercise man, a man working for the king, they would light a fire. And as soon as one fire would light, all the fires would light. And that way the whiskey smugglers know there is something going on. So they would pack up shop and leave. Now the thing about taxing whiskey was it didn't really work. It didn't stop, the illegal sale of whiskey. So it was in the 1820s they got rid of whiskey smuggling. They got rid of they got rid of the tax on whiskey, and they tried to encourage the whiskey smugglers to instead go legitimate. Now it's rumoured that the famous grouse, it's descended from whiskey smugglers. Now I'm just trying to get a really nice view. You can just see it. I know the sun's in the way, so I'm going to see if I can block out the sun just a little bit. Terrible view of my fingers there. But you can just see over there, right there, that is Edinburgh Castle. So you do get a beautiful view of Edinburgh Castle over there. Now, for my final story, I want to wrap things up a little bit. Now, first of all, I've spoken a lot about King Arthur. Now, did King Arthur exist? Well, not the Arthur that we know, but there are contenders. Now, a lot of people say it was the 5th century. It was the 5th century generals, Roman British generals. Okay, let me give you a second. Wait until the connection gets a little better. Okay, I'm going to move into an area where I don't think it's as bad a connection. Now, Arthur McAden, he was a prince. His father's name was Aidan McGabriel. He and his father would have done that ritual of putting his foot into the stone. Now, the funny thing about King Arthur, the original renditions never had him as a king. He was just a great military leader. Now, as a prince, when he was young, he would go on he would go on a pilgrimage, to sort of learn more. So he went on his own Grail quest to Arthur McAden. And when he came back, he was charged to lead one of the battalions in his father's army. He became a great leader, and he actually fought. Now that's the same battle that Merlin was in, Lailacan the Madman, though he would have been fighting against him. Now, Redden, the Christian king, and Aidan McGabriel, Arthur's father, they had a pact, but that pact was eventually broken. They didn't remain friends for too long. Now, here, Arthur McAden, his father got old enough to retire. Normally you were king until you're dead. But Arthur McAden, he got old. A lot of kings didn't get old back then, and so he retired from military duty. And so Arthur became the leader of his army. Now, Arthur's most famous fight was the fight for Edinburgh Castle, well, Dunedin, just over there with the sun. So to continue, I'm back now. So Arthur, he led his father's army when his father retired. He was still the king though, his father, but as the prince, he led the army in what's known as the Battle of Dunedin. That was in 580. Now he came to the top of Arthur's seat right here. So that's where he would have been standing. And that's where he coordinated his army. Now it was the Battle of Dunedin, because that's when they fought off the Anglo-Saxon invaders. The Anglo-Saxons, they didn't come back for another 20 years. So it was a massive victory. Now 10 years later, Arthur died in what's known as the Battle of Minmouth. And after the Battle of Minmouth, when he was fighting the Picts, even though he wasn't a king, his body was taken to the Isle of Iona. Now in the Arthurian legend, King Arthur was taken to Bassin, an island in the Western Sea. And funny enough, that's where Iona is, in the Western Sea. Now they took his sword and they threw it into the lake, as they used to do with the kings. Arthur was a great warrior, so give it back to the goddess and get that money back. And get a great warrior back. I don't know why I said money there, I'm so sorry. So, now, what we believe might have happened, as I said, the first was at the Gododin, was the poem about Edinburgh Castle. Now that fight that took place, where the Anglo-Saxons took over Edinburgh Castle, that happened about close to 60 years later. And the theory goes that after the Brythonic people were kicked out of the area by the Anglo-Saxons, they became refugees. They ended up down in nowadays Wales. Now, when you'd sit around a campfire, you wouldn't talk about the times when you got beaten. You talk about the times when you'd won. Now, they would talk about a guy called Arthur McAden, who really gave the Anglo-Saxons a kicking. So maybe he was the Arthur referred to in the Gododin, and maybe he was the basis of Arthur, but that's just a theory. It's a great theory, nothing to really be proved, but I don't really think it's necessary. You see, the thing about King Arthur is it's a great tale. It's a legend which has inspired so many other legends, and so many other things. George Lucas has credited the Arthurian. Oh, my connection's gone a little unstable. Okay, are we back? Connection. There's not, Edinburgh itself doesn't have the best connection, and it might be a little windy. And by the way, now before we shut things off, just so you know where we've been, right in front, right over there is the Dumpsy Crag I mentioned earlier with Merlin, or the madman Merlin. The grass, the yellow grass you're entranced by, was that area. That's where we walked through as we were on our way up. Now the Lovers Valley, sorry about a bit of a jumpy camera here. I'm also just, this is not the most even rock, by the way. Lovers Valley. Right there is the Nether Hill in the centre. The Nether Hill is where they had the fortification. And hopefully, and yep, up there is the top. And just to finish things off, I'm going to be a little jumpy, the camera, I'm sorry about that, but it's sorry if the camera was very jumpy then, but now we're at the very top of Arthur's Seat. A bit of a panoramic view here. But now everyone, we've come to the end. So everyone, and I'm just talking into the mic here to make sure you can hear me, thank you everyone for coming. I really hope you enjoyed. Now, if you want to make sure I have a safe way down, maybe impress me a bit by sending some donations my way. As I said, I work purely for myself, so to you. Also, if you have any comments, anything you want to know, you can always reach and watch me walk down a little bit. Connection's not the best. Any comments, any feedback, please let me know. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I loved seeing your comments, and I love the fact you got just as entranced as I did with the beautiful Arthur's Seat. Also, if you're into virtual tours as well, I do my own virtual tours. I do a virtual Harry Potter tour, and I do a virtual horror tour. That's a little bit different. There's not going to be any connection issues because I do them from home. That's more of a presentation view, but I do my best I can to make them immersive, especially with the horror tour. There's a lot of jump scares and fun stuff like that, especially for the people who love to hear about ghosts. There were many ghosts on this tour today. But everyone, thank you so much for coming. I'm going to still hang about for a couple more minutes. If you have any questions, do put them in the chat as I slowly make my way down. So thank you very much.
I hate that. I hate the mad sun.
Yeah, definitely, it's definitely worth the hike. Well, it's not even a hike. This is still a hill. It's not that long to get to the top. If this was a hike, I'm not sure if I'd have the step and continue. Thank you so much. You're very welcome, Ross. I like the thank yous as well, by the way.